The Appeal Court Abuja has set aside all orders restraining the Central Bank of Nigeria and the Accountant General of the Federation from releasing funds to the Rivers State government. The three-member panel, presided by Justice Hamman Barka, held that the subject matter was not within the jurisdiction of the court relating to the revenue of the state. While allowing the appeal of the Rivers State government, the appellate court also set aside all the orders made by Justice Joyce Abdulmalik, stating that it was unconstitutional for her to make others restricting Rivers State government to receive funds due to the state from its consolidated revenue fund. The appellate court held that the lower court overreached itself and did not have the jurisdiction to entertain the matter. Let's get further perspective. We're joined now by legal practitioner Henry Ekine. Henry, always good to have you on the news. The opposition coalition has hailed this ruling as a triumph for the rule of law and a significant blow to attempts to undermine the judiciary. I would like your thoughts on that.
Yes, thank you very much. My pleasure to be with you this evening. And I think I completely align my thoughts with that submission. The Republic of Nigeria, the governor, shall be principles of democracy and social justice. Democracy would also mean that the rule of law would always prevail. And then to that extent, as a federal state, we have federating units. So at all times, the supremacy of the Constitution should be what all authorities and persons in this country should defend and protect. So indeed, this decision of the Court of Appeal, setting aside the earlier judgment of the Federal High Court by Joyce Abdulmalik, I think for me is indeed putting the law in the right place and then giving effect to the provision of the Constitution to the effect that the federating units, the component states in themselves, creations of the Constitution are protected by the Constitution as well. I recall that when this judgment was delivered earlier, some of us had comments as legal analysts and constitutional analysts to imagine how a federal high court will seize or will act as if it has the power to determine how a state government or even a local government will control or appropriate its fund. But I think the Court of Appeal has given credence to our earlier positions, really.
Yeah, I remember speaking with you on this subject. I was quite taken aback, frankly, when you said that the federal government should discountenance that ruling by the court. But now you have this ruling, and I'm sure you're feeling vindicated from that. Might I also assume that you are aligning with Honorable Ikenga Ugochinyere, who said that the judgment protected the integrity of the state and the nation's democratic framework?
Yes, I think it's also, for me, it's appropriate, because if we went the way that that decision and similar decisions had actually directed, perhaps the way we would have run our federal system, they would have meant that we are rather being a unitary state, where the component units, the federating units, would have been so weakened and made rather completely subservient to the center. And that's not the ideal of any federal system. The federal ideal would have meant that it's even the component units that would have agreed to federate, to come together for some purpose. And it wouldn't have been a general purpose to the extent that it would threaten the existence of the other component units. So I agree with Igochinyere to the extent that this judgment has protected the federating units, particularly the states. Because if we got to the point where the federating states, I mean the states in this country, could be controlled to that extent, and then I think I would wonder what autonomy would have been left in any way. At some point, we will probably even drift into the functional areas of those states, to the extent that even the federal government would want to do everything about the states. So absolutely, I agree that this decision protects further the federal system we currently operate, and it protects the states and by extension, the local governments.
But it's not yet Nguru, is it? There are those who are saying there is a possibility that the Supreme Court could be approached on this matter by the pro-Wike group. Do you think that's a possibility? And on the off chance, not supposing what the Supreme Court's judgment would be, but just on the off chance that a possibility occurs that the Supreme Court cancels this ruling, what then? But let's start with, will it get to the Supreme Court?
Listen, the beauty about the law is that, especially in our jurisprudence and of course in our legal system, there is a fundamental principle of stare decisis, right? And then precedent. So I am not confused at all. I am not in doubt as to what the outcome would be if those dissatisfied with this judgment, if they approach the Supreme Court. Because the Supreme Court has earlier held in this direction. I would imagine that the Court of Appeal justice today simply followed the precedent that had been set by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court clearly condemned that kind of act when the current president, then the governor of Lagos State, and that was about between 2003 or 2004, as the case may be, and then the Supreme Court had actually held down a very instructive decision that it was unconstitutional for the funds of even local government to be withheld by the federal government, let alone the funds of a state. So for me, I would be expectant that the Supreme Court will not depart from that fundamental right and appropriate principle that led to that decision. So if those dissatisfied with the Court of Appeal decision today appeal to the Supreme Court, I think and I expect that with the sacred principle of stare decisis and the precedent that has been set by the Supreme Court and not finding any reason to depart from its earlier decision, I hope that the Supreme Court will uphold the decision of the Court of Appeal today, that it was unconstitutional. And of course, it was even outside the jurisdiction of the Federal High Court to delve into the funds of a state and how to appropriate or to use or otherwise the fund of a state. And even the ultimate... yes, please.
All right. No, I was just...
This thought.
Yes. We're out of time for this conversation. I was just prompting you to round up quickly. As always, it's a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you very much. Congratulations to Rivers State.